Washington Journal continues.
Our guest is Alfonso Aguilar, the American Principles in Action. He's the Latino Partnership Director. In his previous career, he was the former chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship from 2003 to 2008. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Overall, the message that the GOP presidential candidates are delivering on immigration, what's the impact on the Latino community?
Well, it's very big, but it varies from candidate to candidate. Obviously, Donald Trump is getting a lot of attention, and the message is negative, is devastating. He would never get the support of Latino voters. In fact, Pew just came out with a poll that shows that his favorable rate with Latinos is -51. This is from the guy who says Mexicans love me. And I think some of the other candidates are hurting as well because they've aligned themselves with Trump or just remained silent. Those who are actually reacting to Trump, distancing themselves from him, rebuking him forcefully, like especially Governor Bush and Senator Rubio, are doing very well with Latino voters, which means that if they become the nominee, they'll do well in the general election.
So as far as strategy is concerned, what's the best way forward, particularly if you're looking at candidates like Governor Bush or Senator Rubio? What's the best way forward, even in light of the constant rhetoric that's being said about immigration?
Well, I think, you have to react to Trump, whether you like it or not. He is #1 in the polls. He's leading. So every time he makes an outrageous statement or says something about immigration, I think it's important for them to react to him and to state why he's wrong. I think that's what Jeb Bush did yesterday by going to the border, explaining that Donald Trump is not a conservative, that his immigration plan basically makes no sense. And I think it's very important to do that. If you do that, Latino voters are going to say, they're not like Trump. There are others. We've seen Governor Walker, for example, who has been seen as a top-tier candidate, aligning with himself with Trump, saying that he supports ending birthright citizenship. All of a sudden now he's saying, no, I didn't say that. I'm actually not going to change birthright citizenship. It's a constitutional right. I think in terms of Walker, the damage is done. I think Latinos see him as somebody who's really not favorable on immigration. So Trump is an opportunity. Certainly, he creates a very toxic environment, and if this continues, it can really affect whoever the Republican nominee turns out to be. I think the only one that for sure could overcome this environment, so toxic environment, is Governor Bush, because of his deep connections with Latino voters.
We got a little bit from his reaction yesterday, particularly targeting Donald Trump. We'll air those for you and let you react.
Mr. Trump's plans are not grounded in conservative principles. It would cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It's not realistic. It won't be implemented. And we need border security to be able to deal with getting this country back on track. So I'm not going to get into the issues of what he said and I said. The simple fact is that his proposal is unrealistic. It will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It will violate people's civil liberties. It will create friction with our third largest trading partner that's not necessary. And I think he's wrong about this. If he was interested in a more comprehensive approach, he might want to read my book, Immigration Wars, which I published 4 years ago. I welcome Mr. Trump into the debate. I think that's great. He's serious, he's a serious candidate, and he ought to be held to what serious candidates need to be held to. He needs to be held to account for his views.
And Mr. Aguilar, specifically, he's targeting the plan of Donald Trump, alongside statements from Donald Trump. But is that a strong enough defense? And
yes. Well, Governor Bush is somebody who clearly knows about immigration. His book, Immigration Wars, is a great book to understand the complexity of the immigration debate. I've exchanged views with him on this issue. He certainly knows the issue. And it's irresponsible, and I think that the Trump's plan, it just shows a lack of seriousness when he says, we're going to deport everyone. Well, how does that happen? He doesn't explain. He just makes a statement where everybody has to go. But that goes contrary to what the majority of law enforcement experts say. You can't just round up people and send them out. In terms of birthright citizenship, that's a constitutional right that ironically, historically, Republicans fought for to ensure the full citizenship of African Americans, but at the same time to establish the principle of citizenship by being born in the United States, the so-called concept in Latin of jus solis. And then finally, this idea of curtailing legal immigration. So Trump is not only saying, illegal immigration is bad, he's now siding with somebody like Jeff Sessions, who he was with in Alabama the other day at a rally, and saying that immigration is bad because it suppresses wages. That has never been the Republican approach. Ronald Reagan believed that immigration is a pro-growth policy that can expand our consumer base, generate more economic activity, and create more and better paying jobs for American workers. So really, the plan lacks substance and seriousness, and I think Governor Bush is showing that he understands the issue much better. And in fact, in terms of securing the border, he would do a better job of ensuring that we have less people entering illegally.
Our guest here to talk about immigration and campaign 2016, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and for Independents, 202-748-8002. A line for illegal immigrants if you want to give your thoughts on this topic, 202-748-8003. The American Principles in Action, what is this group? What does it support specifically when it comes to immigration?
We are a very conservative organization that believes in the three-legged stool that Ronald Reagan talked about: family values, small government, sound monetary policy. And on immigration, we believe in the Reagan principles, an immigration policy that's based on rule of law, that secures a border, that strengthens domestic enforcement, but at the same time respects, it's compassionate, that brings people out of the shadows, and also understands the importance of market-based immigration, that the problem is really not so much the undocumented. That's a symptom of the problem. We need to create a market-based guest worker program to facilitate the legal flows of foreign workers that our economy needs. That's basically our view.
Some of the other candidates have talked about lowering legal immigration or immigration overall. This goes to the overall concern about jobs in America, and especially jobs that might be taken from those would say by Americans who would do the work. Is that a realistic view, though, or at least is that a reasonable view?
No. Well, it is a liberal view. It's not a conservative view. I mean, you have Rick Santorum, for example, calling for a 25% cut in legal immigration. Walker saying also that legal immigration may suppress wages. Trump now. They agree with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders says the same thing, which is very interesting. I think it shows that they're seeing the economy as something from a very static perspective, which has never been the conservative way. I mean, when we analyze the economic development, we also use a dynamic analysis, and we understand that more people in the economy is not something bad. It actually generates more economic activity, and as I said, it creates more jobs for American workers, because they're taking niche jobs that Americans are not taking for whatever reason and creating good paying jobs upstream in the labor market for American workers. That's the Reagan view. So it's interesting that people like Santorum are sounding like, big liberal like Bernie Sanders. Who knew?
When it comes to border security, what about this idea that Mr. Trump brings out and others have brought out about building the wall along the southern border?
The thing is that just talking about a wall is very simplistic. I was at Homeland Security for many years. I toured the border. We need strategic fencing. Strategic fencing works. I don't think Governor Bush opposes that or any of the other candidates. But you have to explain what does that mean. And that means perhaps extending double-layer fencing, which actually has shown to work to reduce illegal entry, the number of apprehensions, but really focusing on where the problem is, and that is in the Texas side of the border, specifically the El Paso sector. Trump doesn't even talk about that because, frankly, he's clueless. He thinks just the big wall of Trump will resolve everything. But, there are parts of the border where people are just not entering illegally because there's just no traffic, no movement. So just to say the big wall, that's just red meat for a certain sector of the conservative base, not the majority, but just for a small sector, very vocal sector of the conservative base.
We have calls lined up for you. Let's start with Debbie in Kansas City, Missouri. Republican line, you're on with Alfonso Aguilar of the American Principles in Action. Go ahead.
Yes, my question is why is it that with illegal immigration, we also get the criminal element? We get a lot of the criminals coming through. We can't do anything about them. They come in, they commit crimes, they go home, they come back, they go home, they come back, and then they get to the point where they commit murder. And then we decide to take action. And the other countries don't want them back, but yet we have to contain them? Why is it that we cannot do something about the criminal element coming through? I live in an area where I have illegal immigrants here, and a lot of them are wonderful, hardworking people with nice families. They're wonderful people. But the criminal element, I'm sick of hearing about. They come in the border, nobody stops them, there's nothing to detain them, they can't be sent back home because they come across again because their own countries don't want them and won't contain them. That is my question.
Well, I think that's a very good point, and I agree with you. I think the Obama administration has done very little to secure the border. They basically think it's secure. Apparently, they haven't been to Texas, and you're absolutely right. That opens the door for criminal elements. Even people who may have terrorist intentions. It doesn't mean that it has happened, but it could happen, so we have to take border security seriously. And if we do, through strategic fencing, using other assets, and also enforcing domestic enforcement, for example, creating a biometric entry and exit registry. The majority of undocumented immigrants end up illegally in the country by overstaying their visa. So we want to make sure that those who overstay their visa, we know who they are, and we're able to ensure that they return to their home country. Now, having said that, what we cannot say, like Mr. Trump is saying, is that the majority of immigrants are rapists or criminals. That is just factually not true. In fact, it is shown, study after study, that immigration actually lowers the crime rates, that within the immigrant community, crime rates are lower. So just to judge an entire community because something terrible like what happened in San Francisco took place, it's very unfair. I mean, we wouldn't generalize about the entire American citizenry because a few citizens commit crime. I think we can generalize. I think immigration is good for the country, but you're absolutely right. We have to enforce the law, but we can't just see this from a very limited perspective of just border security. We also need a guest worker program. We may have a wall on the border, but if we don't have a way for immigrants to enter legally to do work that Americans don't want, the market is still going to have that demand for those workers, and they're going to come in illegally. That's why we need a more market-oriented guest worker program. And that's something that Governor Bush supports, Senator Rand Paul supports, Marco Rubio supports, apparently not Donald Trump.
Tucson, Arizona, this is Michael. Hi.
Oh, good morning. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Mr. Aguilar. Look, I'm from the left wing of the Democratic Party, and what you selling us is pure crap. Let me tell you something. This H1V1, this HB1V1 visa problem in this issue right here, we do not need guest workers. We need to give jobs back to American citizens who are born and raised and live here. This theory that they come here because they need to find a better way for their family. No, what they need to do is stand up in the nations that they come from. This is just not concerning Mexico. This is concerning every other country where these individuals come from. I don't care how good they are. I don't care how well their families are or in much need of work. They need to vote in those countries where they're at and get politicians up off their behinds and start creating jobs where they're from. And then they can make a better life for themselves exactly where they're living at. Because this excuse that we need workers coming in because they're educated, they do jobs that Americans won't do, that is a fabricated lie. What we used to do here in America is we used to on-the-job training. If you didn't have an education, at least you were trained to know how to do the job that was available there for you. What we've done now is going through with this theory that, oh, we need this worker from this place. We don't need a babysitter from Germany. We have Americans that will babysit American children. We don't need a guest worker to build a bridge or a road from Mexico. We have Americans that can do that stuff. Quit trying to sell us this fantasy that we need other people to come here and work. No, America needs to get up off this behind and do the jobs that Americans do and let those people do the jobs that their nations need to require them to do.
Michael.
Thank you, sir, and have a nice morning.
Michael, thanks for the call. Thanks for the call. We'll let our guests respond.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I think that I appreciate your passion, and I appreciate that you say that you come from the left, because that's the view of the left, of restricting immigration, legal immigration. And I think you're being honest about it, whether President Obama and Hillary Clinton are not open and espousing that view that they share, that they want less legal immigration. President Obama has always been against a guest worker program. He thinks that immigration reform is just legalizing the undocumented, which, as I've said, is just dealing with the symptom, not the problem, that we need more foreign workers. So I wish that President Obama and Hillary Clinton would be very open and say, like you, that they oppose illegal immigration. Then Latino voters would really understand where they stand. Now, let me tell you something. I disagree with your perception. And, you know, I've traveled all over the country, meeting with immigrant communities, meeting with businesses. And frankly, I just don't see a lot of Americans lining up to do tough agriculture work, to do certain type of jobs in the hospitality industry, in the restaurant industry. Look, when it comes to or what they call low-skilled workers, I think that we should have a labor certification process. If companies cannot find American workers, then they should bring foreign workers. But yes, I agree with you. They should try to hire American workers. The problem is that for those tough jobs at the low end, Americans are just not lining up. And at the higher level, those with advanced degrees, the reality is, and most college presidents can tell you, we're not graduating enough Americans with advanced degrees. So in the meantime, we need to bring those people with advanced degrees from China, India. And you know what? Why it's so important? Because they create jobs for Americans. If we don't bring them in, our middle class is going to hurt. So immigration is good for the middle class. For those who want to build Fortress America, that's going to kill our working class. And that's what they don't understand. But thank you for your call.
Bonnie from Street, Maryland, Republican line. Hi.
Yes, I'm so tired of hearing Donald Trump talk about immigrants. They were good enough to build his golf course and his casinos, but now he comes out with this outlandish talk against them, and Americans will not do the job. They want $15 an hour to say, do you want that meal supersized? I know of a lot of immigrants that are here that are doing jobs that Americans won't do because they want everything for nothing. The more they get, the more they want, and it's outlandish. Shame on the public for letting Donald Trump get away with his outlandish, his talk and a rhetoric. And this is the man that brags about filing Chapter 11 and cheating people out of their investment. This is the man that his clothing line is made in China and the rest of it's made in Mexico. And if he would win the White House, would he want to live there? He's used to living in his big old gold line place. He'd be taking a step down if he moved into the White House. It's time for people to say, stand up and just quit showing him. He's ridiculous. He reminds me of a hot air balloon when he opens his mouth.
Bonnie, we'll let our guest respond.
You know, I think she makes some very good points. You know, I try to figure out Donald Trump, and I've concluded that he's a mixture between Silvio Berlusconi and Hugo Chavez. Both very entertaining, but not necessarily the greatest leaders. Look, I agree that there's an element here of self-delusion. We are frustrated with Washington, so all of a sudden we think that Donald Trump is the authentic person that's going to resolve all our problems. But look, even on immigration, for my restrictions friends within the conservative base, 3 years ago, only 3 years ago, Donald Trump blasted Mitt Romney over immigration, saying that he wasn't welcoming of immigrants, calling self-deportation maniacal, and saying that he was for comprehensive reform. This is Donald Trump. Now, are you being true to yourself when you support somebody who said these things only 3 years ago? He was for partial birth abortion. He was for a single-payer healthcare system, socialized medicine. He advocated for an increase in income taxes. He advocated for limiting the Second Amendment. So, I mean, can we truly think that this person is authentic? Look, I believe that he says he's a non-politician. He's the ultimate politician. And I think he is following his book, who he thinks is the best book ever written, The Art of the Deal. And his goal is to make the best deal, which is to, I think, swindle the American public and win the White House.
Here's Wade, Edgefield, South Carolina, independent line.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking my call. I've been calling in to C-SPAN since '08 about the immigration. I'm into construction, and prior to '08, we were staying pretty busy, had about 10, 11 people working on a constant basis, and now we can't even buy a job out here. We live around Augusta, Georgia, and construction is fully took over by immigrants. I know everybody needs a job in the world, not just in the country, but it's got to the point in America to where Americans can't get the jobs anymore. I don't know what it's going to come to, if it's going to be Trump or whatever, but we got to have some relief in the country so that we can go back to work. Thank you for taking my call.
Right. Again, going back to my earlier point, Trump has flip-flopped so many times, depending on what's politically expedient, that you don't know if he's going to follow through with the ideas that he's articulating today. But in terms of not being able to find jobs in the construction industry, look, that's why you need immigration reform. There are irresponsible employers hiring undocumented immigrants because they can pay them less than prevailing wage or less than minimum wage. And that's so because they're undocumented immigrants. They're not going to complain. Now, if they're legalized, they're going to have to compete with you and other Americans fairly. Because they will be legal and they would have to be paid the prevailing wage. So that's why we want to bring him out of the shadows. But even in construction jobs, there is a labor certification process where you have to ensure that those you hire are American workers. If not, then you can hire foreign workers. But having said that, a company that cannot find American workers should not be told by big government that they cannot bring the foreign workers that they need. That is a very big government democratic idea. Do conservatives believe in highly regulating the labor market? When was that the conservative idea? That's certainly not Ronald Reagan. I mean, Santorum is certainly lining up in Trump with Bernie Sanders. But, you know, I don't know if that's the conservative way.
Our guest, Alfonso Aguilar of the American Principles in Action. He's the Latino Partnership Director. He was the former chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship from 2003 to 2008. And joining us now to talk about immigration and specifically Campaign 2006. Talk about the process of becoming a citizen. Is it too complicated, particularly those here in the United States who want to become citizens?
No, I must say that citizenship is something that we do well in this country. And other countries in the West, Canada, the UK, are actually following our model. It's a great system. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is responsible for the naturalization process. They've done great work in the past years to streamline the process. In some cities, you can become a citizen in 3 months. You know, you have to wait generally 3 to 5 years as a permanent resident to apply for citizenship. You have to take a naturalization exam, which includes a civic and history portion and an English exam. I actually led the effort to design the new test that immigrants, prospective citizens take. And it's a good test. It follows a basic U.S. and civics curriculum, and that it's focused on learning principles like rule of law, freedom of religion, natural rights. And by learning those principles, we hope that they will develop a loyalty to America. And, you know, we're naturalizing around 500,000 or more permanent residents a year. And I think it's true what Ronald Reagan said, that you can become from any corner of the world to America and become, by taking that oath of allegiance, become fully American. I think it's a wonderful process. And again, but it shouldn't be a simple process. It takes a lot of people many, many years. But, you know, it does say a lot about our country that we're still taking people and making them full citizens as American as our forefathers. But it's a process that costs about $685 approximately. And but again, it's a simple process, and Immigration Services is doing a great job in managing it.
Sandra in Alabama, Democrats line. Hi.
Hi. Mr. Aguilera, from what I take of it, you act as though anyone who is against illegal immigration is against Hispanics. Well, we have one in our family. We love her to pieces. She's my sister-in-law. And she'll be the first one to tell you it's the illegal part that y'all just cannot seem to understand. It's not just Hispanics coming across the border. We just seen where in New Jersey they're letting people get their driver's license, women with burqas on. You can't even see their face. That is just asking for someone to come in and blow up this country. I mean, things has got to be stopped, and it goes with the border, then it goes with coming in the country legally and jobs. There is Americans who will do jobs if they just get the chance to do it. And it just burns us up to hear y'all go on and on that no American will do the jobs. Well, there's plenty of us out here. I have a sister who cleans houses when she can get a job. I'm telling you, there is Americans who will work at picking fields, at cleaning houses, you name it. They'll do it. Just give them the chance. People's already took the jobs. It's what y'all don't seem to understand. And I'm sorry if I've got upset, but I just want you to know how we feel. Thank you very much.
Look, there's also a population factor here that you have to understand. The average age of a white Anglo-American is 41. Our population, you need healthy population growth for our economy to grow. Our population is growing because of immigration. Without immigrants, you cannot grow economically and create jobs. Are we gonna, if we stop legal immigration, like some are proposing, and follow the model of declining populations of Europe, we're going to be in the same situation that they are, with stagnant economic growth, countries in recessionary processes. I don't think that's something that America wants. The average age of a Hispanic is 27. We need young people, and that helps to keep programs like Social Security solvent. So it's not that our country's overpopulated. We actually, I would argue, we need more immigration. Now, I understand that the economy is in terrible shape, that the jobs are being created are not good paying jobs, but don't blame the immigrants for that. Look, there's a reality out there, and if an American wants to get an agriculture job, he or she can. But I tell you, I've been in Arizona, I've been in California, and they're just not lining up. And it's not that there are no Americans of working age to do those very tough jobs. And employers have a responsibility to hire them over a foreign worker if they line up, but they're just not lining up. So I think we have to understand that. And again, immigrations, they're not taking jobs away from Americans or suppressing wages. They actually help create jobs for Americans. And this is very important. If you're in a restaurant, for example, and you don't have people working in the kitchens, bussing tables, you won't be able to create the waiter jobs for college students, the management jobs for Americans, or keep other small businesses related to the restaurant industry growing and expanded, industries and companies that are owned by Americans. So I think I understand the pain of a lot of people who are not getting good paying full-time jobs, but I think it's easy to blame immigrants when they're really not responsible. What's responsible are the bad big government policies of this administration that has led to economic growth that is not robust enough and job creation that jobs being created that are not good paying full-time jobs.
What's the best way to deal with the 11 million or so illegal immigrants here in the United States?
Well, look, there's no easy answer, and by the way, there's no magic formula to fix our problem. But there's no way we can remove them. So what I say is, as I think Governor Bush has articulated as well, let's give them a path to legal status. No special path to citizenship. Doesn't mean that we close the door to citizenship. If they want to become citizens, they have to follow the path established currently by immigration law. But after they pay a fine, back taxes, then allow them to remain here with legal status. And once we fix our problems, then we can start really enforcing the law so people who arrive now illegally can be removed right away. But to say that all of a sudden let's just secure the border without thinking about those 11 million, or saying, like Trump is saying, that we can actually remove them. And lately he's been saying that we would actually go to their houses and remove them forcefully. I mean, I think that's un-American. It may violate civil liberties of some, because a lot of the children of some undocumented immigrants, of many undocumented immigrants, are U.S. citizens. I think that that is not the right way to proceed. I don't think it can be done anyway. We don't have the resources to remove 11 million people. A lot of them have been here for decades. So the best way to do it is bring them out of the shadows in a process where they understand that they've broken the law. But then ensure that this doesn't happen again. And we ensure that it doesn't happen again by having a comprehensive border security plan, enforcing domestic law, and ensuring that employers don't hire undocumented immigrants by having an E-Verify system, or perhaps even some form of biometric card for immigrant workers, where they can't take a job if they don't have that card.
Here is Joan and Marilyn for our guest. Go ahead.
Good morning. I think people are very excited about Donald Trump because he has an understanding of the frustration of the average American, like no other politician. The Latinization of America is not acceptable without our consent. We are a country of immigrants, yet in 2008 and 2012, we heard, oh, the Latin vote. They're becoming kingmakers. To my feeling about this, it's all about power. We can't have open borders and a welfare state. We are doing very poorly. We're going to wind up like Greece. We are headed down the road to misery and poverty in this country because our politicians are interested only in power, and the Democratic Party wants a Hispanic vote. President Eisenhower, many, many years ago, deported 1 million Hispanic immigrants, illegals. It can be done, but we don't have to do that. We just have to stop the welfare, stop the hiring, and give America back to Americans who are not doing that well. In my own family.
Well, thanks.
Look, I agree we have to reform the welfare state by all means. But the majority of immigrants don't have access to federal benefits. That is just a fallacy. As even permanent residents, green card holders who are here to live permanently, have to be in the U.S. 5 years until they have access to federal benefits. Undocumented immigrants don't have access to federal benefits. But I agree, we have to reform the welfare state. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But where I disagree, and I think we have to be fair, is this whole idea of Latinization of America. Our American identity is not based on blood or religion. It's based on ideals, on democratic principles, on a shared sense of history, and yes, a common language, because we need English to communicate, to deliberate our problems. But we shouldn't see, how many Hispanics are already citizens? Are we going to question how American they are? I mean, this is going down a slippery road when we start saying these people are not American or this other are not American. We're all American, and talking about the naturalization process. As soon as you take that oath of allegiance, you become a citizen. You become as American as our forefathers. And even from the beginning, the founding of our country was, at that time, yes, the majority were white, Anglo-Protestant, but even within that community, there was a lot of diversity, different denominations, and at that time, that was a recognition of great diversity. That's how our country started. So, to start seeing Latinos as some other group or a group with an agenda. The Latino community is not monolithic. You have people with different views, different countries of origin, different socioeconomic backgrounds. Look, Latinos are pro-life. The majority of them believe in life, believe in traditional marriage. If conservatives were smart, they would be constructive on immigration, so to overcome this issue and they will become very competitive with Latinos, and Latinos will be very supportive of conservative causes. Now, you mentioned Donald Trump as being the person that understands how people are hurting. Do you know, again, that Donald Trump was for comprehensive immigration reform 3 years ago? That he blasted Romney for being for self-deportation? You're willing to give that guy a chance? Do you really trust him? Don't you think that a year from now he may say something completely different from what he's saying now? I mean, there are others that believe in just focusing on border security and are against legal immigration. Rick Santorum, people like that. But they're at least more honest and coherent than Donald Trump. So, I mean, I would ask you, why are you putting your trust in somebody who's flip-flopped so many times? And again, I think there's here the celebrity factor. I think people enjoy Donald Trump. They've seen him on TV. But he's turning this entire primary into a reality show. But, you know, people get tired of shows. And at some point, they're going to get tired of Donald Trump.
Our guest is the Latino Partnership Director for the American Principles in Action, Alfonso Aguilar, joining us to talk about immigration and campaign 2016. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, we're going to hear from education activist and author Jose Luis Vilson as he talks about the challenges that he sees facing public education. That is, Washington Journal continues after this.